All right, my name is Anna Tuttle, and I'm the project coordinator for the Montana Climate Assessment. This is our state's first climate assessment. Yeah, we are focusing on 3 topics this round: agriculture, water, and forests. But we want to do this again and talk about human health, fish and wildlife, tourism, and other ideas we have as well. I love this project. It is meaningful, it feels very timely. It's being done for Montanans by people who really care about Montana. It's been very inclusive, and I also feel happy that I'm going to get to tell my kids that I actually did something for climate change. But I had a really steep learning curve. So I have a background in science and a background in project management, and I had done nothing in climate science. There were so many names and terms and organizations and agencies, and I really needed a plan. So a year and a half ago when I started, I learned about the people, then I learned about the agencies, then I learned about the climate science. And so we had these meetings, and like really early on, people would conversationally say things like, in its first iteration, the US GCRP used 4.5 and 8.5 RCPs, and I was like, what? I have no idea what you're saying. And then when people would think I'm note-taking, I really was just writing down everything they would say, and I didn't know what any of it meant, but I was comompetent enough that I could just repeat it in my notes. And I'd secretly be Googling what is an RCP? I really didn't know. So after we started these meetings, it was really go time. That is my daughter. My kids have actually been in a lot of these meetings on sick days and whatnot. This is Nick Silverman. He works for the Montana Climate Office. I'm sure that's really important. What he's doing? I don't know, because I don't know what it means. So I really had a lot of catch up to do. I read the National Climate Assessment, the Colorado Water Plan. I read Pennsylvania and Wisconsin's climate assessments. I was looking up terms like what is an RCP? What is the US GCRP? What's the IPCC? What's the difference between a projection and a prediction? And why am I never allowed to say the word prediction? I'm not really sure. Well, now I know, but I didn't at the time. Anyways, it was a steep learning curve, but I did my homework and I started gaining ground over the next couple of months. I was getting climate science and I was starting to understand our whole process, and I finally knew everyone's names. And while I was doing this, our chapter authors for the assessment were conducting these listening sessions, and they were going around the state and talking to Montanans about climate. And these really cool stories were coming out, and I loved these stories. And the first one that got my attention was on the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. It has to do with research. They are doing some really cool work on climate change, and they're using a lot of hard science and some amazing science. But they're also using it with oral history. So for example, a place called Where the Chokecherry Grows, there's not chokecherry there anymore. So it's a call for research. Well, why? Why isn't it there? And I was really fascinated by this concept of taking hard science and oral history and putting them together to learn. I thought that was fascinating. Another story was in 1994, the Big Hole River almost ran dry. In 1995, the Big Hole Watershed Committee was formed, and I don't know if any of you were here for Tester's talk, but Eric Costa, who was a rancher, talked about how getting a committee together on the Big Hole started out as a series of fistfights, but ended well, and the committee came together in 95 and 97. The Big Hole Drought Management Plan came into fruition with a motto of shared sacrifice and shared success. And by collaboration and working together and giving up access to water, they've been able to keep water going even in drought years since 1997. My last story has kind of to do with complexity. The Montana Climate Office tells us that there is 100% agreement on climate models that temperatures are going up in Montana. So Montana is going to get hotter. They also tell us that there's going to be no change in the total amount of precipitation that we're going to get. So at the outset, you might think, cool, great, temperatures are going up, but we're still going to get a lot of precipitation. But the way that that's going to come to us, turns out, is really different. There's going to be less snow in the mountains. It's going to lead to earlier runoffs and low irrigation levels for late season crops. There's going to be more big events that happen, like floods. I don't know if you remember the flood that happened a few years back in Roundup, and people were trapped in that community for days. We need to adapt. We need to know what's going to happen so we can adapt. But we don't actually know what's going to happen. So it's really complicated. And the more I learn about it, even though I'm getting a lot better at climate science, the more I still get confused. But after hearing these stories, and others, and after my crash course into climate science and climate policy, there are a few things that I do know, and I thought about them when I was sitting down for this presentation. Montanans know that climate change is happening, and they might hesitate to name it, but people see their land changing, they feel the increase in forest fires, they know it's happening. Another thing I know is that it's a really big deal. And I knew that before, but working on this project, I really, really know it on a different level. I've also learned that we're all really important, and a large part of my job coming up after a year and a half on this project for the next year and a half is going to be outreach, talking to Montanans, hearing from Montanans, and hearing different perspectives about climate in Montana. I've also learned that I can help, and as cheesy as it sounds, we all can, so can you. We can support positive efforts to adapt. We can support events like this. We can support collaborative efforts like the Big Hole Watershed Committee. They have a fantastic website too, you should check it out. And we can be advocates. I went to the Women's March in Helena, and I got made a lot of fun of because everyone had these like huge signs, and I just had this like tiny little note card that I made the night before. It was kind of like I was squeaking and I wasn't really yelling like everybody else. But I did speak up, and I feel like educating ourselves and participating in our own state's future is the biggest thing I've learned in the last year and a half. That's it.